Ain't so bad out here once you get used to it.
Still a lot we haven't seen, though.
And a lot for us to do.
Yeah.
Buck up, we're just getting started.
I've been a fan of the Final Fantasy series for quite some time now. I'm not going to say I'm a veteran though, since I didn't know anything about 7 until Advent Children came along, and never got the chance to play any of the older titles until they received re-releases. No, my first foray into the series was with Tidus's adventures through Spira in Final Fantasy X back in high school, and I enjoyed the series ever since, at least until I picked up a copy of 13 and got a taste of the god-awful direction Square Enix was trying to take it. But thanks to word of mouth from a good friend, and the demo that came with the Type O remaster, I decided to give this entry a try when it came to PC. Final Fantasy 15 is the latest entry in the Final Fantasy series for PS4, Xbox One, and now on PC. And while it is true that it does make up for the poor quality of 13 and is a good game in its own right, it does fall short of greatness thanks to a number of bugbears and issues with the story. At first, 15's story seems like rather straightforward Final Fantasy fare. We play as Prince Noctis of Lucius, our country is at war with an evil empire, there's going to be a peace signing that was a trap, and now we're on a quest to get the crystal back. But it's when the obvious backstab happens that the story starts to take things in a different direction. Rather than getting directly involved with a resistance movement, instead, Noctis and his friend's first thought is to find his bride-to-be and follow through with the marriage that was part of the peace deal. And while the two do have an established connection, it's not really a romantic one. It's just childhood friendship and nothing else. The game does try to sell that they're in love, but it just comes off as forced regardless, and it's hard to take seriously since we never see them connect or interact outside of when they were kids. And considering that his kingdom has just been completely taken over, you'd think getting married would take a backseat to maybe liberating his country or taking the fight to the Empire first.
Yes, only the true king, anointed by the crystal, can purge our star of its scourge.
You really think I can do that?
As Oracle, I will see to it. To aid the king.
But the story has bigger issues than a romance that just doesn't feel genuine. Like the fact it feels like it's missing parts. We're introduced to a small cast of characters aligned with the Empire, and naturally you'd think they'd play major roles at certain points, but they only show up once or do one thing if they're lucky. Hell, the Emperor doesn't even have a moment of betrayal where the real villain is revealed. There's also this plot point of Noctis needing the blessings of 6 gods, but when it's first brought up, it was so sudden and out of the blue that I thought, wait, wasn't our quest to get hitched? The only other flaw the game has on the story side of things is its handling of its lore. It doesn't tell you anything. It is there for those willing to look for it, but it's never really at the forefront. In Final Fantasy X, we had a good idea of what we were trying to do, and as we moved forward, more of the world was elaborated on through character dialogue and interactions. Whereas here, you'll be forgiven if you reach the end of the main story and still have no real idea how the world works. Hell, I'll give Final Fantasy XIII some credit. At least it did include a bloody glossary when the characters babbled about things like the L'Cie, the fal'Cie, and the Gobble-de-Moogles. Here, all you get is some Bibles scattered around the world that don't even feature complete info, just snippets of information on much bigger parts of the lore. Now, I know I'm making the story sound terribly written, but that isn't necessarily the case. There are plenty of genuinely moving moments that have the potential to stir your emotions, and the characters themselves are fleshed out and well realized. In fact, it's when the story slows down and focuses less on Noctis' quests and more on him and his friends bonding and hanging out, that's when it shines and it's at its most enjoyable, as they go on the most epic road trip ever. Thankfully, gameplay is where Final Fantasy XV really shines, eschewing the traditional turn-based combat and any hybrid system for a real-time hack-and-slash setup. At first, it does feel rather simple. What with in order to attack, you just hold down the attack button. But it's a case of easy to learn, hard to master, as you can pull off all sorts of combos through singular button presses or holding down the attack button for different lengths of time. Factor this in with Noctis' warp ability, different weapon strengths and weaknesses, blind sides, and character specials, and you're in for fun every time you encounter enemies. Outside of combat, on the other hand, is where the gameplay is at its weakest, since with the exception of a handful of activities, the rest of it is just kinda dull. The majority of the game is open world, and you are free to explore it at a certain point at your own pace. And while the game does try to incentivize exploring, there's no real need to. By the time you reach the final fight, by default, Noctis will be strong enough for it to be a fair challenge, and through narrative progression, you're guaranteed the bare minimum to tackle anything the game can throw at you. Exploring and side quests can still be worth doing for the sake of grinding, but you'll be forgiven if you're just left bored to tears. Since outside of enemy encounters or picking up items off the ground, you don't really interact with the world in a meaningful way. Interestingly enough, there is fast travel between locations, but before it's unlocked, you can make use of Noctis's car, the Regalia, to get around quicker. And while it does work as intended, most of the time you're just stuck on a track for drawn out periods of time. Things are livened up by banter, but the truth is, until you unlock fast travel options, traveling is more tedious than it really should be. However, exploring can be livened up by traveling at night when demons are out, which means more fights, and also by riding chocobos, which is always fun and never loses its charm. With the side quests though, they just come off as mundane busy work. You'll just talk to someone, go somewhere, and collect something for them. From what I saw, there's no interesting quest lines like in Skyrim, The Witcher, or even Two Worlds 2, nor do they contribute to fleshing out the lore or the world. The only side quests worth pursuing for fun and rewards are the Royal Tombs for the ancient weapons they hold, and the Hunts, which offer not only challenging mini-boss fights, but also briefly turn the game into pseudo-Monster Hunter. However, the hunts are rivaled in greatness by one activity that's better than has any right to be. Fishing. Not only is there a fishing minigame, but it's incredibly well made and actually the most intense aspect of the game, thanks to how well thought out the mechanics are, from organising your rod to how the struggle of reeling in a fish is simulated. After playing this, I now realise why Square Enix decided to make the VR tie-in a fishing sim.
Massive!
Visually, the game is absolutely stunning thanks to great texture work and lighting in the environments and impeccable detail on the character models of the main characters. Sure, some stuff does look cheap, but it's all stuff that's in the background and you really need to look hard to notice. Sound design as well is phenomenal, with the music in particular being a highlight that helps draw you into the action of combat and the drama of the story. The only times when the presentation was marred was during brief hitches in the frame rate, or when there was obvious stuttering in the lighting or on the character models. However, it is safe to assume that this is an issue with the Windows Edition, as it is the latest version and on a platform the game wasn't originally made for. But with that being said, this is a great port, save for some questionable choices, such as requiring the use of the I, J, K, and L keys to navigate the map over the mouse, or using Shift to access the inventory, meaning it's easy to hit the caps lock instead of accessing it. And oddly enough, the game can reach a frame rate over 60 FPS, but there's no real option to uncap it, so if you got the hardware, the highest you can go is 120. There's also the odd inclusion of a first-person view option, and while it's not a bad idea in concept, it has been horribly implemented. Gameplay doesn't change to reflect the new point of view, so you have no way of getting the best idea on enemy positions in battle, and unlike Oblivion or any other first-person game ever made, your weapon is never made visible outside of attacking, so you never know what the length of your attack is going to be, and more likely to miss than in third person. I really can't help but imagine some designer thought of this at the last minute, got the okay from his boss to program it in, but had no time to refine how it would gel with the core design, making it feel more like a gimmick aimed at encouraging veterans to buy the game a second time.
Like a true king. About time.
If you're looking for a JRPG that'll give you good value for your money, then Final Fantasy XV is something you should grab. It's not perfect, and whether or not the long wait from back when it was Versus 13 is justified will vary from person to person. But if you do decide to pick it up, you're going to be in for a fun time that'll make you forget all about 13 and its 20 hours of nothing but corridors. Also, you may have noticed that I didn't touch on any of the expansions bundled with the Windows and Royal editions. Well, that's because I wanted to focus on the main story now and give the expansions their own video. So, stick around for part 2.
It's time to finish this once and for all.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video, I really do appreciate it, and if you really liked my content, then feel free to also like, favorite, and subscribe. Now, for game reviews this month, I'm going to be doing the Early Access MMO Crowfall, and of course, part 2 of this review, taking a look at the expansions for Final Fantasy XV. And in terms of movie reviews, I have 2 in the pipeline for A Quiet Place, and of course, Infinity War. I've got all that and more coming up, so, like usual, stick around.